We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, looking at climate change, alternative energy sources, and many other notions that are going to increase the standard of living, the quality of life for now some 7 billion souls on Earth. And many people are saying all we can do is try to sustain and maybe even reduce the quality of life. But as many of us know, out of the 28 industrialized nations, all those other members of the United Nations are saying, not so fast, we don't think so. Because we want to actually have the same quality and standard of living that has actually been in most of the Western and some of the Asian worlds over the last 200 years. And technology is a way to address that. But we have to have the research, and then we have to have the practical projects, the programs that are going to put these in place. And so we have two gentlemen with us that have been working on this for many, many years. I have one young man sitting right beside me, Henri Polgar, who is the Executive Director of the PanAmerican, PanAfrican Association. Henri, welcome.
Thank you for having me here, Dr. Hancock.
And you've been traveling all over the globe for many years now with our good friend and very dear colleague, Robert Pritchard,
yes,
who
indeed.
is the founder of the Pan-African and Pan-American Association. And this goes all the way back to the late 60s when all this happened.
Indeed.
Tell us a little bit about Dr. Pritchard and your relationship with Papa.
Dr. Pritchard, Robert Pritchard, he's now 83 years old. His health is declining, so we're keeping alive his legacy as the founder of the Pan-American, Pan-African Association. And he is also a very, very distinguished concert artist, and he traveled all over the world for many, many years as a concert artist. And what he did is that he in creating the Pan-American, Pan-African Association, he continued to keep alive the idea of cultural, economic, and educational exchange between African nations, the emerging African nations, and the United States.
And he was one that really brought about this whole notion as far as sustainable development. And just like with the EmeraldPlanet, we're talking about the environment, with the economy and civil society.
Yep.
And actually, Dr. Pritchard is one of the pioneers as far as all this, and we need to be very, very proud of him. But you know, as your name implies, Pan-American, Pan-African, now you're working with Erik Hagberg, which we're going to be introducing here with PAC International. He's been out in the Pacific for 10 years and doing very valuable research as far as, you know, food production and the whole notion of fiber and fuel at the same time. Why is the Pan-American, Pan-African Association now working in the South Pacific? And what do you see as far as that relationship with the United Nations, which you've been a part of for many years?
Well, in keeping with Dr. Pritchard's work, he never, even though the name Pan-American Pan Association that's the name that it bears, he's always been involved in projects in countries all over the world, in Japan, in the Pacific Rim. And so when we met Mr. Hagberg and PAC International, we were very interested in the work that they do. And for us, we're not scientists in terms of our background. We're an organization that came out of the human rights advocacy movement and cultural projects. But for Dr. Pritchard, the emergence, the sustainable development movement for us is a continuum of the support that we gave many years ago for instance, African liberation movements and many distinguished cultural projects. And so the whole concept of sustainable development for us is an extension of that in terms of integrating it into human rights, socio-political rights, because that's in fact what the true definition of what sustainable development is conceived of.
Well, Erik Hagberg, looking at this very small atoll here, we're talking about very global issues as far as sustainable development, civil society, democracy, all these other issues, and yet we're looking at a very small place that has almost minuscule populations, but yet are critically important as we move into the 21st century. Because one is that they're the proverbial canary in the coal mine as far as what's happening with sea level rise and severe climate change, but also they have a way forward because of just their their isolation, but at the same time traditional culture, because this is maybe 10,000 years of culture in these areas that's mostly ignored by the world. So looking at this particular atoll here, what are we looking at as far as why this could be a way forward in the 21st century?
Well, Goreau Atoll is a Polynesian outlier. It's one of the most magnificent places in the world. It's only 5 degrees north of the equator, but they're right on the front line of climate change because the sea is washing up washing over the island from above and permeating up from below. So climate change is destroying their way of life. And
well, actually, it's destroying possibly the whole population and the culture that's been evolving over these 10,000 years.
Now, Goreau might have a population of about 500 residents, but really it's indicative of a much larger portion of humanity which is critically threatened by climate change. And leading the movement, Goreau has stepped forward, and they don't want to let their island disappear under the sea
and let their culture go.
And they're the type of community,
Yeah.
a very well put together indigenous community where they have come together and made a commitment to do something.
Well, Henri,
about
looking at this indigenous peoples communities, this is something that just a year ago the World Bank has set this up, and this is on an annual basis. So this was a grant program for the gentleman that we're looking at here. It's a senator from Micronesia. But actually, Robert Pritchard and the Papa was one of the first organizations affiliated with the UN that really focused on indigenous peoples.
That's true, and this is a project that we were helpful with Senator Benjamin in attending. Was the World Bank Development Marketplace, and they were participants in this event, in which they were, out of thousands of applicants, they were successful in coming to the World Bank, the top 100 recipients of
Which
grants.
is absolutely an incredible honor.
Yeah.
But looking at this whole thing, this is part of this grant competition. This is something I understand that the Papa is working on right now as we move into 2010, but beyond that, 11, 12, because this is going to become a annual kind of thing. But this climate adaptation, this is something that I know that Dr. Pritchard, the Papa, has been involved with since the late 60s. Well, how do you see this moving forward in the 21st century?
Well, in particular, even though we admire Mr. Hagberg, his scientific know-how and background, we're not scientists. He's the scientist, but we totally support his efforts. But for us, it was more having to do with the aspect of cultural diversity. When you talk about sustainable development, the original concept had to do with the concepts of social development, economic development, and environmental protection. But since its origins, what has happened, there's a great movement which we are proud to be a part of, is insisting that cultural diversity is just as important an element as these other three categories.